Hi, I'm Jennifer White from LiveOne, and welcome to Women in Entertainment. We are here in an absolutely gorgeous house in Malibu, getting ready to sit down with an incredibly accomplished group of women to talk about women in media, in entertainment, and beyond. Plus, we are going to get a special performance from an emerging artist, Tabby, who will be playing for us a little bit later on in the show. But now, let's get the conversation started, meet our guests, and welcome again to Women in Entertainment. So what I'd like to do right now is just go through and introduce our panel, and then we'll get started talking about the highs, the lows, and all the in-betweens of being a woman in this industry or adjacent to this industry. So let's get started over here to my left with Paige Kaplan. Paige is an entertainment attorney who focuses her practice on the representation of songwriters, music producers, recording artists, writers, film producers, television production companies, content creators, digital management companies, agencies, and basically anyone involved in entertainment. Thank you for joining us, Paige. Next up, we have Samantha Manners, and Samantha is a talent manager and a music exec with record label Bear Trap Sound and Bear Trap Management. It's a boutique management company representing artists, songwriters, and also content creators. Thank you, Samantha. So next up is Carolyn Blackwood, who started her career as an entertainment lawyer and was most recently the Chief Operating Officer of Warner Brothers Motion Picture Group, where she oversaw the financial management, physical production, and operations of the studio's theatrical and streaming film divisions. So next up is Tiffany Naiman. She is the Director of Music Industry Programs and an Assistant Teaching Professor at UCLA's Herb Alpert School of Music, as well as a lecturer in the Musicology Department. And she is an accomplished David Bowie scholar, which is, how do you get that job? I love that. And then next up, we have a familiar face to many of us, Michelle Ruiz, and she is a 3-time serial entrepreneur, a keynote speaker, a former Emmy Award-winning TV news anchor, a mom, and we'll put the cherry on top, a best-selling author. So clearly we have assembled one hell of a panel here. So let's get started. Obviously, you're all very, very accomplished women in the entertainment industry, and we'll definitely get into the challenges that come with that because that's kind of a given. But I also want to talk about the positives. Do any of you feel like being a woman in a male-dominated field comes with any advantages or unique skills and perspectives that have helped you along your career path? When has being a woman in your career been an asset? And let's start with Michelle.
So, so in news, when I was as a newscaster, people watch the news. I don't know if it's known, and I know now today we consume news through the internet and social media and all those kinds of things. But at the time when I was at NBC, it was still the time when you still watched primarily news on network. Women were actually the reason why people watched the news. Even though it is, and it still happens, unfortunately, to this day, but it's a bit better, men typically are paid more. But women are the reason why people watch. And if you kind of think about it, we know that attractive women, nice-looking women, people will watch. Older women, unfortunately, it's a bias, but you don't see a lot of overweight women on the air. You're starting to see more of that, thankfully, thank goodness, because it's a representation of real life and real women. But people will actually make decisions based on how a woman presents. Men, how many balding, heavy, scraggly looking men. And by the way, they're all good too. But on air and do well, and people watch, right? So there's that. So having said that, women do have power in that regard. Being a Latina tech entrepreneur, not just a Latina entrepreneur, but a tech company, obviously male dominated. But in this particular case, in my tech company, we focus on technology around mitigating implicit bias, including gender bias. There's actually an advantage because that's kind of an area of expertise that women tend to dominate, and it's kind of an outlier in terms of tech.
I'd like to take that and run with it over to Paige if we can. And Paige, as an entertainment attorney, we were chatting earlier, and you told me about an interesting statistic as far as women enrolled in law school. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Right now, I think it's 56% of law students are female. And when I was in law school over 5 to 8 years ago, I think it was around 50 to 51. So just in the past 5 or so years, that's increased almost a percentage every year. So if we're trending that way, it's going to be all female attorneys in some time. So I think, women just think differently. We problem solve differently. And so, at a law firm when I first started, it was all male partners, and I was the lone female associate. And so sometimes, they would all be talking about a problem, and I saw it a different way and presented that. And it was just really interesting to see it's hormones and life experience. And so when you look at something, you just see it differently. So I definitely think that's a benefit.
Cool. And Tiffany, in the world of academia, how does being a woman give you an advantage in that field, or how has it?
An advantage. I think it's always the surprise factor. I mean, I think we have the surprise factor often where everybody doubts us. And
good call.
and we're brilliant, and we're usually more together, more educated, and hungrier in lots of ways. And what you were saying about your enrollment for law school, I mean, UCLA's music industry program is at like 60% women, wow. Right? So women think they need to learn the things to go into the industry to change it, right? And they know that, whereas, I'm not saying anything terrible, but a lot of the boys even that we will interview are like, yeah, I'm gonna be a producer. And they show up in their sweats.
What is that saying? It was, Lord, give me the confidence of a mediocre white man.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Samantha. Go ahead.
But I was just going to say, in academia, I think that there's been a radical shift in academia where, especially in the music realm, where women are just standing up and talking about being a woman, dealing with music, dealing with the music industry, dealing with the misogyny and patriarchy that has existed for so long in relationship to music. And so we're being heard finally, which I think is brilliant.
And this is a great segue. Oh, hi, Oscar. What's up?
I want more pizza.
Okay. Samantha, I wanted to ask you, as a talent manager and music exec, do you relate to what Tiffany is saying? Or do you see more women entering the field and maybe having a more prominent role?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's definitely an ever-evolving situation, the music industry in general. But I think both of these women hit the nail on the head with just saying that I think we're kind of coming to the precipice of the industry understanding that there is a benefit to having a female on your team, if not having a female-driven team, right? Where we can be more organized. Excuse me. This is a generalization, but we can be more organized. We can see things from a different perspective. And for me, it's really interesting because our audience is predominantly female. So my client has been at the forefront of taking my advice on things because I am the audience, right? Yeah. So I think understanding that and understanding how I will receive things versus our audience has also been really exponentially different than how things were seen in the past.
And we're going to take this over to the world of film with Carolyn. And, you have a vast experience in film and streaming. And what's your take on this? Do you see more women entering this field? And do you see it as an advantage as somebody who is in this realm?
I mean, is this not even on? Yeah, there it is. I love being a woman in this business. Yeah. I really do. And I'm not going to say that there haven't been huge challenges and that I haven't experienced, massive misogyny and sexism. Of course I have. But I agree with what everybody on the panel has said, including things like it's the surprise factor. That's one of my favorite things. Underestimate me. Fantastic. That's an advantage. So for me, all of those things that we think about as sort of female traits, like empathy and understanding and, caring about sort of the note behind the note, as I used to like to say. Like when, you're dealing in a situation, and oftentimes in any industry, but yes, in a creative field, you get a lot of, sort of emotion and high stakes and tension. And I have found as a woman, it's been much easier for me than some of my male counterparts to figure out what the note behind the note is of that. And then it helps you solve the problem. So for me, I have seen it as much as it's been challenging and at times, yes, a detriment to get proper recognition and climb the ladder and all of those things. In terms of the actual job and the satisfaction and feeling like I'm effective, I think being a woman has been a massive advantage. And I love when I'm underestimated. It's fantastic.
And a few of you mentioned being underestimated. Go ahead, underestimate me. How do you navigate that? Like in a real world situation, somebody just doesn't think you have what it takes or doesn't think that you're the right person for the job. Like, how do we handle this? Anybody, please jump in.
Just be great. Prove them wrong.
and know that you're great, right?
Yeah.
Right. Not, and it has nothing to do with them. Like that idea that like, oh, you don't think I can do this?
Yeah.
I
agree. I think one of the things that there's been a number of times where you have to actually, you succeed and you achieve it, and you can't spike the ball in the end zone. Do you know what I mean? You have to be aware of that because that can backfire. So some of it is, yes, be great, get it done, right? The people who know. Yeah. And then you have to be comfortable and confident enough to not spike the ball in the end zone, and it's going to advance you.
Yeah. You walk away slowly, holding the ball right to the sideline.
I have a saying that is, tell me I can't do it, and I'll show you 3 times over I can.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's kind of how I've operated my life. I had to learn how to be resilient as a child. I had very difficult circumstances, and that's kind of just framed my determination, stick-to-itiveness, gutsy, figure it out, turn over every stone. And so whenever I've interpreted or felt that someone doubted that I could do something, I was just like, oh, okay, I'll show you. Yeah. I won't say it. I'll just go, okay.
But also to piggyback on that a little bit, I think there's also this thing too where if you look up in the room and you realize everyone's in the same room, right? Like everyone's in the same room for a reason. Yeah. The intern also has great ideas, just as the CEO does. And I think that if you don't have that drive to prove people wrong or you struggle with like, okay, I'm going to wake up and be great. Just remember, like, you're in the same room with all these other people as well. Yeah. And that's for a reason.
I was going to add one thing to that.
Oh, please do.
Which I think I do think in terms of gender sort of stereotypes, we do as women tend to have imposter syndrome more than men, right?
Agreed.
And so one of the things that I have sort of really strived to do through my career is like lift up the other women around me to sort of, remind each other that like the imposter syndrome is fake. It's just like, don't buy into it, because I do think that that's one of the self-sabotage things that we do in terms of gender dynamics that I don't see happen as often with men. So,
agreed.
My whole thing has been like, lift up the other women around you. We all feel it. We all know it. I don't know if it's in our DNA. I don't know what the hell it is, but like push it aside.
That's definitely, it's what I did when I was in the film industry, music industry, and in academia. I take these young women, and they're the people they're so scared about getting a job in the industry. They're failing once they it's a constant thing. And more so than being a professor, I am their cheerleader all the time, right? And they're like, I need a job because I don't want to go back to Alabama. Like, I made it all the way to UCLA. I've had that happen. I'm like, I will get you a job. I promise, And I think that is the most important thing that we can do, actually, as women, is both take care of ourselves and take care of the women around us.
I was just going to add, this is a very important topic because I just did a virtual conversation earlier today, and this specific topic came up because we know we've all heard, obviously, of gender bias, And often when we think about gender bias, we think men have higher levels of gender bias towards women. Actually, the research shows, and my company actually has data to support this, women have as much, if not more, gender bias towards women than men do.
It's how we're taught.
And
I think it's a zero-sum game.
There can only be one of us. There can only be one Madonna.
Exactly.
Right? There can only be one female pop star.
It's the competitiveness. And so, right, we've all heard, like, what is this, kindergarten or elementary school, like, right, or et cetera. And so that unfortunately does carry out as we're adults. And so when I hear you say your intentionality about supporting women, that is critically important. Because for many women, and obviously men too, as women, we need the support and advocacy and allyship of men as well. As women, I'm obviously talking in generalities, not all women. But we need to be conscious and aware that sometimes our default may be criticism and competitive, nature, and that we really do need to take a different perspective in terms of supporting, not just mentoring, but sponsoring women, which is two different things.
Now, was there a point in your careers, maybe just starting out, where you were that girl who was too competitive or maybe challenged other women? And it's okay. I'll say that it was me in the very beginning of my radio career. I was challenged by any other female that walked in the room because I did think they were going to take my place. And I don't know if there was a specific turning point, but I think as you get experience and as you understand that that's not really a thing, you can flip the script and really choose to help other women. Was there a time in your careers where you were that girl and a change happened? Or are you all just wonderful people who walked into
I don't think
job?
it's so much that, we're such wonderful people. I don't know. I can't speak for the panel. But I think that for me, it was more it was a little bit, I was always the only woman in the room.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the competitiveness with other women that I felt that way, but I did acknowledge and knew and was very present about the fact that I was the only woman in the room. And so a lot of that for me was wanting to get more women in the room, just if nothing else than the sisterhood of having a backup. Because when, if I had a point of view that maybe would have been perceived as, like maybe traditionally female, you also just wanted the support. So right. For me, it wasn't so much of a. I saw some of that, definitely saw some of that, but I didn't personally have that as an experience as much, simply because of the nature of the way I had sort of navigated into my career. It was traditionally I was in the rooms, the decision makers were men and me. So that part of it was, on one point it's empowering, and then you have to remember, like, wait, but I'm also alone here.
Right.
So that was more my experience. I don't know about the other panelists.
My first year of practicing, I remember, everyone warned me about the men, but I got on a call with an older woman, a woman that was more experienced than me, and she was really condescending towards me because I was younger, I was a woman, so I did feel that. I promised myself I would never be that way, and now I have two girls that I'm mentoring, and the two things I notice is they apologize a lot and they defer to me a lot. So one thing I always do, I say, don't apologize, and what do you think? So that's something I'm very intentional about is having them, use their voice and not feel bad for it.
Now, we're mentioning mentoring younger women or women who are newer to the industry. Did any of you have any female mentors who made a big difference in your career or your career trajectory at all? Or were you just thrown into the pit with the boys?
I can kind of go back to this. I had when I came out to LA, I was in film and TV, and I had a boss that was very condescending. And I think there was a lot of learning what I didn't want to be from that experience. So in a way, that's still mentoring, right? So I've just made it an initiative in my career to be the complete opposite of that woman. But outside of that, I had this really great experience. We were releasing a song, and it had a sample in it, and the label said that they couldn't clear it. And we had, kind of a 2-week deadline, which is, if you know anything about music, is very, very slim. And so I started to clear it, and I cold emailed Mark Cuban to ask him for help. He wrote me back in 4 minutes with the head of Magnolia Pictures, which was the producing partner of the film, and got about halfway there, right? And I had never done this, so I was like, just kind of winging it. And finally, at our publishing company, I got a hold of the sample clearing agent, this woman, Kat, and I said, "Hey, I'm knee deep in this, and I'm freaking out because it needs to be done yesterday." And I said, "Will you please do it for me?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Okay." Right? There's this like pause on the phone, like, "All right, well, shit." And so then she was like, "Yeah, you're halfway there, and you can do this, and this will be for you." And she taught me how to do it, and she was the first person to congratulate me, and it changed the course of my entire career, and the confidence that I built in that situation was immeasurable.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I had a woman. I didn't go to college till I was 35, so
Wow.
it was a weird trajectory for me. And there was a woman at Cornell who I had as an outside advisor because I had two men, and I was like, they don't know what I'm talking about really when I'm writing, and I need this. And I met her, and she had danced incredibly in front of my DJ set at a musicology convention, and that's how we met. And that woman, Judith Pereno, is like one of the most brilliant academics and musicologists, and just was so supportive of this person that decided to do a 360 to come out of film and music and become an academic, and would just be like, well, you can't just say it like that. It has to sound a little bit less colloquial, or whatever. And so I'm so grateful to her. And then I think really the friends that I have that are not in what I do, there's Truly Hall and Hazel McCarthy and these people that are in all these other art worlds that are my friends, Claire Didier, Deborah Cayola, that are artists and women that have been trying to make their way for a long time. And the way in which we support each other and our comrades, I think, is so important. As much as we can have large groups of friends and all these people we know, that a core group of women that are also trying to do the same thing have really helped me being in disparate genres.
How important is that friend group, that colleague group from outside of your industry for all of you? Is it just an absolute necessity? Have you ever gone through a time in your career where you didn't have that kind of support and had to build that community?
The network, your network as opposed to networking, is really important. Yeah. And I will tell you, sometimes we tend to get enrolled in or self-select or choose networks that are like us, right? Whether women or our industry, or if you're a minority woman, or whatever the case is. But there is great value in expanding and diversifying your network. And that is really important. I have to say, I was thinking about your question earlier about the mentors. I have had a few female mentors, but the biggest mentors and the biggest supporters of me have been men, both in news and in my business, my entrepreneurial journey as well. And I'm so grateful for that. But all that simply to say is the diversification of your network is really important. Not to say that there is value in having people that are like you, because certain things can only be understood by people who have the same lived experience, whatever that is. But there's also value in having others. So I intentionally, once I became aware of that, I intentionally try to develop relationships with all kinds of different people.
Let's extend that to the workplace, and let's talk about what efforts several of you may have made to diversify, to include more women, more minorities. Is that something that you all have had the ability to do in your careers, and have you taken that opportunity?
Yeah, I think I mentioned when I first started at my firm, all men, solo female associate. Then there was a second and a third and a fourth, and then we were looking at candidates for another, and I really wanted this woman to join, and one of the male partners, bless him, was like, is it kind of weird that we're all men and you guys are all, yeah. And we were like, no, it's really badass, and we hired her, and she's amazing. And so, I guess just advocating for other women, regardless.
Brilliant.
Well, and when I started in the UCLA music industry program, amazing man started to build it, and he knew the people that he knew. which is why he brought me in, which is brilliant. And he had been one of my advisors, so he brought me back from Stanford. And I was able to hire Lauren Spalding, who founded Femme House, who's a Black queer woman, and Allison Wolf from Bratmobile. You know, like, I got to make the music industry program at UCLA. I wanted it to look like what we want the music industry to look like, right? And so that I've been allowed to do that and bring all these different people in that are completely diverse, completely have bizarre backgrounds, right? They're not academics. I'm the only person besides Bob with a PhD that's in the program, right? Yeah. We want the people that are in the industry, but also want to give something back to these students and are interested in a public university, right? Rather than the schools that we shall not mention that are. Right.
I'm going to say something controversial.
Yeah.
Let's go. So I definitely believe in making sure that we're sort of trying our best to, and I did this in my former job, you know, elevate women, be massively inclusive, people of color, all different shapes and backgrounds. But one of the things that I started to see was a misinterpretation of those initiatives by others, whether it was sort of the HR groups or, you know, like other well-meaning, well-intentioned people. Mm-hmm. And one of the worst things that can happen is if what you start to do with nothing but good intentions is you start to populate people into roles of which they're not ready to be into. I mean, stretch assignments are great. Like, nobody ever said, you know, like there's a million famous stories of, you know, a woman being given a CEO position and people say, oh, it's such a stretch assignment, which always pisses me off because no one ever says that about a man. But there are examples where, you know, in a very sort of well-intentioned, desire to advance, if you set people up to fail, you're actually setting people back. And that was something that I started to see a little bit. There were a couple of people I championed and you know, still believe in them. I still think they're hugely talented people, but I recognized that I made a mistake by putting some people, you know, in positions where they weren't properly set up to win, because in my sort of fervor and, you know, desire to really, you know, help someone I knew was talented, you know, to win, I did it too quick.
Got it.
So sometimes I do think that we have to, in our you know, desire to really help, we have to be smart about it too, and we have to be honest about this, and we have to give people the resources to sort of get better at whatever it is, or get them, you know, prepared for what it is we're going to put them into. Throwing somebody into the lion's den and being able to say, oh, I checked this box off with my corporate HR department because now I have X number of people, it's not helpful.
Let's extend that to the content that we make, or the people who we work with or study or represent make, right? How important is it to each of you to be inclusive in what you're putting out into the world? Not your workplace, but we're talking about product or times in your career where you had the opportunity to bring in a more diverse cast of characters. Let's go ahead and start over here.
Sure. So, you know, on the record label side and the management side, you know, you kind of don't really have that opportunity to choose, right? You go where the talent is, and that's just what it is. But as far as the representation of content for my clients, I'm very fortunate to have specifically Black Bear as a client who is very progressive in that and wants his female audience to feel like they're seen and incorporated into the content. And I think, you know, so I don't really struggle with that as much. But it's definitely something we talk about in every opportunity with every production, of course. Because you want your audience to feel like they're seen. You want females to, specifically with a predominantly female audience, you want them to feel like they are a part of this project, this person, this music, this situation.
And Michelle, as a journalist and a storyteller and a writer, how about you? How important, and a Latina, like how important is it for you to include your community and others in the work that you do?
So I can talk about it from the network news component. Diversity in terms of content is extremely important, because you're right. If you don't have diverse perspectives, that impacts how people interpret or view issues that are going on in the world. So, and I'll tell you, in newsrooms, producers and editors and reporters are going to their contact list, and who is it? It's the people they rely on all the time, and they tend to, not surprisingly, look like them, because that's where we gravitate towards. So, intentionality around including diverse voices. And diversity, by the way, is not just race and gender. We often think about that. Includes age, includes socioeconomic status, it includes culture, it includes disability, which, by the way, is not always visible, and even veteran status, other kinds of things. So that is critically important in the news field. And there's some progress there, but it's really not where it needs to be. In my company today, we're all about implicit bias. We are putting out content that shows a lot of diversity. And even though this is our specialty, I had a situation come up today where someone on the outside brought up to us that a certain section of our website was an accessibility. There were colors on that one particular section of our website that was difficult for individuals who have visual disabilities to actually see. Like, oh, yes, of course, right. So we immediately went to, so that fix is in the works. But it's really important, very important.
Michelle just went through my syllabus for my class, basically. That was amazing.
Do I detect a guest speaker?
Come on over. I mean, it's literally what I'm trying to teach the students going into the industry is to think about disability. We have a section on disability. We have race, class, gender, commodity, all. How can you be a disabled person in the industry? How does that function, right? Whether it's visible or invisible, mental health in the industry, right? And it's actually the stuff and the environment. That's the other thing that they're very interested in. And I'm excited that the students are interested in this. They're more interested in disability in the music industry than they are like, how do I become a manager, right? They're like, how can I be somebody that makes my grandpa able to come see me perform, right? And things like that, which I think is really moving and gives us a lot of hope as we age. If these are the people who are going to run the world and run the industry, that those are the things that they're thinking about. But it is something that, I think is rare even in education to make sure that you're thinking about in media, like all the things. It's not just race. It's not just gender. It's class. It's education. It's disability. All of those things all at once are the things. If we're all thinking about that all the time, and I always say, I'm like, it's still a music industry. It's supposed to be fun, right? But be aware that this other stuff is happening, right? Then I think it's going to change, at least in what I'm seeing through our students at this moment. I get 60 kids a year that pass through, and all they want to do is, get their grandpa to the show and make sure there's no trash left by Coachella and things like that,
Now, I think I can speak for all of us where, seeing more diverse stories and more inclusion and stories from different perspectives, music from different perspectives, it's kind of a given. Like, of course we would want that. But we know that there's a certain segment of the population that, gives a little bit of backlash to those sort of things. Like, why do we need a black Little Mermaid? Those kinds of conversations. How do we handle that kind of stuff when it comes to inclusion and diversity? And I'm curious about your experience in that. Because it's, especially in the film industry and your background there, it's been such a huge conversation in that realm.
I think some of it you have to look at a little bit as it's baby steps, and it's little things, small things, piece by piece. You some of it is like, you have to also look at it as a little bit of white noise, in terms of like, okay, you got to tune it out. There's always going to be, large sort of, noisy things around anything that people consider too controversial. And look, we're living in a society that's incredibly divided right now. We're going into another presidential election, and speaking for myself, I don't like anybody. So it's frustrating because everyone doesn't, everyone feels on edge and like something is, nobody's speaking to them, and anything that looks like it's speaking to someone else by definition feels like it's not speaking to them. And I don't think that's always going to be the case. And I want to believe that there's more positivity out there than there ultimately is negativity. It's just that negativity is really loud. So when we would do certain things, like whether, we made a lot of decisions about a lot of the content that we made. It's a business. Okay. It's a for-profit business. You're looking to make money on these things. But we were always conscious of it, I can say, especially in the past decade, very conscious and aware about trying to do what we thought to be sort of the right thing. Whether it was, Judas and the Black Messiah, I remember, was a movie that we made that the economics on that didn't look great, right? And we would have this expression, like, sometimes you're making things for the wall, you're making things because it's the right thing to do. And it turned out great. We were wrong about the economics of that movie, And then there's movies like, Barbie, that, when we greenlit Barbie, it was, okay, we're going to put it together in a way. And Greta and her team were, incredibly thoughtful about the way they wanted to represent all these different things in the movie and what they were trying to say. And they also knew that they had to be careful because they didn't want it to feel medicinal, but at its best, it would be a really commercial movie, and at its worst, it would flop and we'd all lose our shirts. So,
I think you did okay.
And then we did okay.
Yeah.
As it turned out, we did okay. But there was even people when we, started production on that movie before it turned out, when they saw some of the casting and there was, different pieces of, sort of diverse casting in that film, there was criticism, and you just kind of have to just tune it out and trust the creative instincts that you have and know that you're sort of doing things for the reasons you're doing them, and then not feel like you have to necessarily get there all at once with, getting people's hearts and minds. But nobody talked about, after the success of Barbie, nobody was talking about those things anymore. People weren't talking about, they were talking about other things having to do with the movie, but nobody was talking about the casting anymore. Yeah. Of the supporting characters and the, the dueling Kens, and, nobody talked about it. A movie like Crazy Rich Asians, which was very much about a very particular community, and it did fantastically well because at the end of the day, it wasn't really about the Asian community. It was a rom-com, and everybody could relate.
Exactly.
And nobody talked about that anymore. So sometimes you just have to kind of like play through, and hope that little by little you're breaking through certain barriers and changing people's sort of hearts and minds a little bit.
If I may, to pick up on what you were just sharing. So we know we live in a world where there's a lot of resistance, a lot of, noise, and it's become okay to be racist and an a-hole and, all that kind of stuff. But the majority of people, if you really think about it, the majority of people don't want to cause harm to other people. Right. Now, they may feel threatened. They may feel like something's being taken away from me. It's fear. But a lot of this is fear-based in terms of what we're hearing. But statistically, the majority of people support the concepts of diversity, as long as they feel that it's being applied fairly, right? And that there's some objectivity to it. Having said that, so in my experience, when I hear, especially this whether it's race or why that or why this person, whatever the case is, or we even hear it in use of pronouns, right? We've all heard resistance around that. And my response is always, I hope there's no John in the room. John, you strike me as a person that you don't really want to hurt someone, right? Yeah. You strike me as a really good person, yeah. So what's the big deal if someone wants to be called they, them? If you don't want to cause them harm, what's the big deal? What's the big deal about making an accommodation for somebody who has a disability that may not necessarily be physical, but they may need some extra time to get ready or to go to their workplace or to do whatever, or need time off to go to doctor's. It's like, if you approach it from you strike me as a person who doesn't want to cause harm. Usually, not always, but usually you can get that resonates. And the other point I just wanted to make was around, you also hear in response to these criticisms is, well, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. That's a triggering statement, by the way, for a lot of people.
Because it is so much a part of who you are and your experience.
true, but also factually, it's not correct. We all see color. I'm on a panel. I'm on a panel where everybody is in black, but me in burgundy. I see color. By the way, it's great. We all see color. We can't pretend that we don't see color. And I think what we really are trying to say, when people say that, I don't see color, I treat everyone fairly. I think what they're really trying to say is, I try to make decisions and lead my life where I don't let color impact. And that's really what they're trying to say, but they're misstating it. And then when they state that, for people who have been on the receiving end of discrimination or microaggressions or being disregarded or whatever, it's a triggering statement. And the facts don't support it. So I just thought I would share that.
Now, this is something that we've all faced as women in the industry, as a Latina in the industry. It hits you hard personally sometimes, doesn't it? When there is discrimination in the workplace or around some projects that you've worked on. Paige, I want to ask you, like, you're dealing with a lot of very interesting cases and interesting representation, and I'm sure that you run into some things that you feel like are not on the up and up, or that you'd rather, oh, I wish I didn't have to work here, or on this particular case, things of that nature. And I know it's got to have kind of a personal impact, as many of us take home our work when we're done for the day. How do you handle the negativity, or like the bad vibes, if you will, as we're all going to pick them up from time to time?
I'm actually very fortunate in that being in entertainment, we don't have many controversial clients, or at least we don't anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, we represented Rudy Giuliani for a while way back when, so wasn't around during that time. That would have been a little difficult, but I do think it's important to use your tools and your skill set to outside of the workplace, right? Like, I'm involved in a lot of pro bono projects. I do a lot of immigration and asylum work, and those are definitely areas where you want to create a little bit of a barrier, because you don't want to take that home with you. It's really hard to do, but
even when you're doing the good work, right?
You're fighting the good fight, and it's difficult. Particularly with asylum, we see some of like the most horrendous cases, and we do like Big Brother, Big Sister, and when you have the resources and you have the skill set, just applying it, in your personal life, in your work, in everything you can do, it's very important.
And Paige, in the music industry, you are at events. You are hanging out with all different. I'm sorry, not Paige. Samantha, you're in the music industry. You're going to events. You're hanging out with different artists. You're in all kinds of different high pressure and sometimes highly intoxicated situations. There's a lot of situations that Paige might not see from day to day that someone in the music industry would. When you go home at night and you have to shake off some of the behavior you've seen, or some of the people you've had to work with who may not be all that positive, how do you care for yourself or flush it out or deal with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I'm quite as balanced as I'd like to be on that, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I mean, it's hard not to walk away and hold a grudge. It's hard not to let that thing that so-and-so said radiate throughout the rest of your week. It's hard to bypass some of those things. I mean, I think the one example that I have that rings most true to this is, for a while I was the tour manager, and about 2 weeks in, I changed my email from Samantha at Bear Trap to Sam. And that world is predominantly filled with a lot of production managers that are male, and so I would coordinate with them, correspond with them via email, and then the day of the show, we would get there and I would introduce myself, and they would be shocked that I was a woman, right? And then at the end of the night, surprise. Right. And then at the end of the night, we're closing up shop and, paying out all these things and wrapping up the night. And it was always hard for me to hear oh, you're actually so cool. Actually,
Gross.
Yeah. So I think things like that, I think, were more kind of hit me a little harder than some random person at a party underestimating me. It's like somebody now you've worked with, and now you're actually good at your job. I think those are the things that kind of sit with me a little harder.
Carolyn, how about you?
I think that for me, some of it is, earlier in my career, there would be, let's say, producers that we would work with that are maybe not the best human beings. And, I have a pretty strong moral compass about some of that stuff. And so I could, and by the way, I was a bartender for 15 years. So I know how to handle myself with guys like that. And so it was, in those sort of situations, which otherwise might be compromising, I always felt like I was capable of handling myself. Where I used to get really upset is when I saw people prey on younger women.
Yeah.
And oftentimes inserted myself in a way that was very sort of, aggressive.
Good, and thank you. Seriously.
But yeah, that was, so for me, the harder part was, and it's still a professional context, and there were times where I would, it wouldn't always be good for me that I would piss off certain people because of the way I would choose to interfere. But it wasn't so much me personally where I felt like, oh no, or I have to deal with this, or like, I don't know. I kind of, a lot of that stuff it was just more when I saw it happen to other people.
Gotcha. And so, Tiffany, not only do you have to take on like the psychic burden of what your coworkers might be up to, but you have students as well. And I'm sure you've had some interactions with people that you've taken home and taken on. And how do you deal with it?
Well, I mean, how do I deal with it? I play music really loud and dance around. Yeah. I mean, that's it.
And shot of tequila. Yeah.
I can't believe I would quote Taylor Swift, but shaking it off. Yeah.
I love Taylor Swift.
I don't, but everybody does.
Do.
And I'm great for everybody else.
My
right?
daughter and I have gotten closer because of it. I love it.
But good for her, and that I shake it off, and it's. As somebody that was in the film industry, then and as a DJ my whole life, walking into rooms where they would talk. My friend used to play drums while I would DJ, and they'd start talking to him, and they're like, "It's her show, it's her gear." It was crazy, and he would have to walk out of the room so that they would talk to me, and now with my students, I feel like I can really support them in these moments. They come to me all the time. I'm like the counselor too. I mean, we're a small department, so I'm like everything. But they come to me and they're like, oh, I'm really uncomfortable. If anybody comes to me and they're like, this guy is saying this in my internship, I'm like, quit. It is not. I'm just like, just quit. Yeah. You do not like either tell them to fuck off or quit. Sorry if that's no. Not TV anymore.
We're in the entertainment industry. You do not ever have to put up with anything. And like that's how I deal with it, is like making sure young women going into the industry realize there's always another job. Yeah. There is always another job. There's always a better person that can be your boss or your producer or your co-writer. There's always somebody better out there. And do not think this is the only chance you have, right? And so I just go home thinking, oh, I did that. Okay, now I'm going to listen to Taylor Swift, even though it's weird. And speaking of Taylor, Michelle, how would you tell a younger woman coming into the entertainment industry how to handle it and how to shake it off?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a good question because, when I came up in the news world, it's highly competitive. It was very gender biased. It's probably a bit less so today. And, I would internalize a lot of the negative comments that I would hear. Whether warranted or not, by the way. Many of them weren't warranted. Yeah. And I would stew over them. And we've probably, many of us have been there, not slept for a while, thinking about it, right? Ruminating over it. I wish I had known then what I know now, which is, one, if you speak up, right? And I think we're in an environment today where more women can feel free to speak up. That wasn't always the case several decades ago. So one, speaking up, letting people know where your boundaries are. And sometimes you might experienced a negative impact, as in someone letting you go, firing you. I had a very, very well-known agent that, sexually harassed me, and I said, nope, not for me, and done. He didn't want to represent me anymore. Like, okay, fine, whatever, I'll find someone else. But my point is, speaking up is important. And the other thing, too, I wish I would have known is, to your point, there are other places. There are other, for the most part, there are other. And so we have much more resources and tools and advocacy avenues for ourselves than we used to, I would say. So I wish I'd known that then.
And I just have to redeem myself with Taylor, because I don't want all the comments. I'm scared of Taylor. I'm scared of Taylor.
Swifties are going to come after you.
They're going to come after me. But the thing is, she's given a lot. Like, even if I don't care for her music, she's given so many young women like the ability to feel proud and to speak up, and like what she did with her producer and her label and all of that is extraordinary.
The DJ who touched her.
Totally.
Like,
I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely extraordinary as a human female woman in the music industry. Even if I would rather listen to Susie Sue, that doesn't matter. She's
That's fair.
Actually incredible, and is really teaching young women so much. Like, when I was a grad student, people started writing about Taylor Swift, and I was like, okay. And now I'm a professor. It's like 12, 13 years later, they're still, all they want to talk about is how Taylor is empowering them to do something. So I'm giving her
model. I do.
big props.
I do.
Big
and I
props.
see it with my daughter. So I'm a fan.
And it all comes back to Taylor Swift. I want to thank you all for being here, and I think that that's kind of a good place to end. That how lovely that we have people like you all and like Taylor to look up to and take cues from in the entertainment industry. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Paige
thank
Kaplan,
you.
Samantha Manners, Carolyn Blackwood, Tiffany Naiman, and Michelle Ruiz. This has been LiveOne, Women in Entertainment. I'm Jennifer White, and thank you all. We have one last piece of this evening, and I've been looking forward to it ever since I heard her sitting up here in front of the Dolphins rehearsing. You are in for a treat. Please welcome Tabby.
Hello. How's everyone doing? I didn't hear anything. Were you miserable? Come on. It's freezing. Another thing that I do as a woman is just care about the outfit first. I am going to be doing a lot less talking and a lot more singing, and none of the words will be mine. But this song is called Valerie, if you know who Amy Winehouse is. Maybe not the best role model, but she's amazing and one of my biggest inspirations. So I figured I'd honor her after those amazing women. Sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, yeah. And I think of all the things, what you're doing. In my head I paint a picture. 'Cause since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess. And I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Yeah, Valerie. 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 Did you have to go to jail? Put your house up for sale? Did you get a good lawyer? Hope you didn't catch a tan. Hope you found the right man who'll fix it for you. Are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you busy? And did you have to pay that fine? You was dodging all the time. Are you still dizzy? Hey. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? I think you guys know the word Valerie. Sing Valerie with me. Yes. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Oh, Valerie. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Ooh. Why don't you come on over? Yeah. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Valerie, why don't you come on over? Valerie, why don't you come on over? Juice had never heard this song before he played it today. Can we just give him a round of applause for that? Learned it today, and I'd never heard the song. I don't know what's crazier. Thank you so much. Also, I want to say Sarah and Julia, who helped create this whole day, thank you to you guys. You guys are amazing. And thank you to LiveOne for putting on this amazing event and all the panelists. I'm truly wowed. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me too.
Okay, I told you that was going to be a very good discussion. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us here at LiveOne Presents Women in Entertainment. So thanks again also to Tabby, who put on an amazing show for us here at this gorgeous house in Malibu. And for more events like this, plus the best in music, podcasts, entertainment, and beyond, make sure to visit liveone.com. I'm Jennifer White. Thanks for joining us.